Thank you very much for this opportunity. Well, I think I have a unique background in both professionally and personally that really makes me the right person at the right time for this position. My background, just a little bit about myself and my family. I'm born and raised here in New Orleans. Born to teenage parents. Grew up originally in the Callio Project. Eventually grew up, spent most of my formative years in Lower Ninth Ward, raised by a single mother who raised 3 boys, all of whom became college graduates. And so my mother is the person who I really attribute as being the guiding light for myself and for my brothers, who really instilled in us a passion for education as being the most important way for us to get out of the humble upbringing that we were in at the time. I was fortunate to get a full scholarship to De La Salle High School here in New Orleans, where I competed each and every year for a scholarship. Certainly without that scholarship, I would not have been able to maintain that education there. And so I took full advantage of it at De La Salle. I was a leader of many different organizations, ultimately rising to be the first African-American student by the president of the school. I was the first Black valedictorian of De La Salle. I think it's still the only in the history of that school. I was also elected as Louisiana Boy State Governor. My brother also had that same distinction. I think we're the only 2 brothers in the history of the state to be elected to Louisiana Boy State Governor. So that was a school that really instilled in me a passion for leadership, a passion for service. I tell people many times that one of the hallmarks of my leadership style is that I really do view leadership and service as being inherently linked. When I was in high school, student council was referred to not as COUNCIL, but COUNSEL. We were leaders of the school, were responsible for counseling, with assisting our fellow students as much as possible. That was our responsibility. It wasn't about titles, it wasn't about positions, it wasn't about accolades, it was about service. And so that lesson is something that I walked away from De La Salle with, that I hold to this day. I was fortunate to go on to Harvard University, where I studied government, graduated in 1997 from Harvard University. Met my wife at Harvard, first day of school in 1993, and we started dating about 2 or 3 weeks before graduation. My wife, when we first started dating, she understood I always wanted to come back to New Orleans. She understood this is where my family was, this is where I wanted my career to be. And I remember her telling me, maybe we could retire there one day. Mm-hmm. And so my view of that experience is that one of my best pieces of legal advocacy has really been convincing my wife, who's a Northeastern girl through and through, to move back here to New Orleans with us to help pursue some of the interests that I've had in terms of making our city a better place. I went on to Georgetown Law School for law school in Washington, D.C., served as editor-in-chief of the law review there, the White Collar Criminal Project, which really sparked my interest in criminal law, in particular criminal law enforcement. And after graduation, went on to obtain a very prestigious federal clerkship, appeals court, 3rd Circuit out of Philadelphia. Followed my wife to New York. While she did her residency at NYU, I went on to practice for about 5 years at the 2nd largest law firm in the world, Skadden Arps, there in Manhattan, where I practiced exclusively in white-collar criminal defense under the leadership of a group of former federal prosecutors. And so the way that group was really operated and trained, the way that they trained their associates was really modeled on training assistants, the way that assistant U.S. attorneys were trained how to investigate, how to take depositions or take witness statements, and how to really build cases. In 2005, my family and I decided to move back here to New Orleans, and I was fortunate to apply and actually got an offer, which I accepted, to join the U.S. Attorney's Office here in the Eastern District of Louisiana. Interviewed with Jim Letton. He extended an offer to me. I accepted in July of 2005. Very next month, of course, as we all know, Hurricane Katrina hits. My family and I remain committed to getting back to New Orleans, but it was a struggle. We had a newborn at the time. My wife is an OB-GYN, and as you recall, the hospital situation in the city in many ways is still recovering from much of what we endured out of Hurricane Katrina. And so we struggled to try to find a place for her, but ultimately we decided as a family that it was not the right time to get back to New Orleans. But I bring that up simply as a reference to show you how long we've been committed to getting back to New Orleans. I retracted my acceptance and applied and got a position at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, which is Manhattan, the Manhattan district there. The Southern District of New York is the first U.S. Attorney's Office created in this entire country. It is typically held out as the most prestigious office in this country, and certainly is held out as the model for the way that U.S. Attorney's offices are to be operated and the way that training is to be implemented. And I think frankly, my training in that office was critical to Senator Landrieu's consideration in deciding who to recommend for this position. During my time there, during my tenure there, I rose from general crimes through narcotics to ultimately practice in the organized crime and political corruption areas. In 2010, I then made the decision to return back to New Orleans. I was recruited by then partner Brian Jackson, now federal judge Brian Jackson. He now serves as chief judge for the Middle District of Louisiana. He recruited me to take over his white-collar criminal defense practice at Lisco and Lewis, which was a wise decision on my part. It has been an outstanding law firm, outstanding legal minds, outstanding people to practice with. They've been very supportive of me throughout this process. And so that's where I've been since 2010. Throughout that time, I've served as head of the white-collar criminal defense practice there at Lisco. I also serve as hiring partner for the law firm, which is second only probably to the president of the law firm, is the most visible position in the law firm. I'm the first African-American to serve in that capacity. Since returning back to New Orleans, I've gotten thrown into public service immediately. In less than 3 years, I now serve as chairman of the board for New Orleans College Prep. I serve as chairman of the board for Breakthrough New Orleans, which is a world-renowned summer enrichment and after-school program. I've served as general counsel for the Young Leadership Council. Governor Jindal has appointed me to serve on the State Civil Service Commission. Mayor Landrieu has appointed me to serve on the Public Belt Railroad Commission. And so, among other things that we've gotten involved in, I've always viewed this move back to New Orleans as one where public service was going to be the primary focus, and frankly, I view this opportunity to serve as the next U.S. Attorney as really an outstanding opportunity to serve our community.
Given everything you just said about leadership and service, and in particular the training you received at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, Manhattan, and what you know about things, the things that have taken place of late in the Eastern District. Talk to me about the approach you will bring to the U.S. Attorney's Office here to ensure that public trust and confidence in our office is restored.
Certainly. At the outset, I'd like to just commend the assistant U.S. attorneys in that office. I mean, there are some very outstanding prosecutors in that office who have in no way been implicated in any of the recent issues that have come up out of that office. It's really been a handful of people who've been implicated in any way. And what's happening right now, as we all know, is that there is an internal investigation which is running its course. Hopefully it's nearing its end. And my hope is that by the time the next person who assumes the position of U.S. Attorney takes that seat, much of what we've gone through will have already passed. With that said, there are certainly some bad practices that resulted in some of the situations that we've most recently addressed out of that office. For example, simply in terms of leadership in the office, we had one person who served as both the first assistant in the office as well as head of criminal division. Those are number 2 and number 3 in the office, right under the U.S. Attorney. That's a lot of power to entrust in the hands of one person. There's a lot of checks and balances that need to come from having those positions separated. there is no other office in this country that operates with those two positions held in the hands of one person. And so that's something that has since been split up, and there are two different people serving in those capacities. I certainly intend to continue that process. Another aspect of this office that needs to be revamped, in my view, is the hiring practices of the office. Really, there needs to be a focus on diversifying that office to a great extent, and really what I'm talking about is not just gender diversification or racial diversification, although those two are certainly high priorities for me as well. I think there's about a handful of African Americans that serve in that office right now as assistant U.S. attorneys in a district that is obviously overwhelmingly African American. That needs to be addressed. But really what I'm talking about is in terms of the source of their hires. Traditionally, this office has hired almost exclusively from the ranks of the Orleans Public Prosecutor's Office. There's a handful from the Jefferson's DA's office. When you look at the way that most of the offices, the best run offices in this country, the way that they handle hiring is that they hire certainly from the ranks of some prosecutors' offices, but they're also hiring from law clerks, they're hiring from nonprofit organizations, they're hiring from civil law firms, they're hiring from criminal practice and the criminal defense attorneys. And so the result is that you end up with a spectrum of opinions who are involved in making decisions about what justice means in our district. And those are very important, very critical decisions, obviously. You're dealing with issues of people's liberty. It requires a diverse group of opinions to make sure that those opinions are reflective of every aspect of what justice could possibly mean, and to ensure that it's being handled impartially and fairly. And so that is certainly one of my primary focuses will be is really trying to broaden and diversify the ranks of the office. Lastly, I think that there is certainly some training that needs to be refocused.
There is this image that our city, our state is full of corruption, and there are so many problems, and of course corruption, political corruption, white collar corruption is an issue here as it is everywhere else. And the U.S. Attorney's Office has to be aggressive in investigating and prosecuting those activities where they exist. How do you see balancing that with what some may say appears a perhaps overzealous attempt to target individuals for reasons that may not have anything to do with any alleged criminal activity? So how do you, doing the job that you need to do without overreaching, without bullying?
Yeah, no, I understand exactly where you're coming from. I think one of the things I've already mentioned will help really address that issue, which is, there's a tremendous amount of power that's entrusted into the hands, not just of the U.S. Attorney, but each and every assistant U.S. Attorney. I mean, just the power to write a subpoena and have hundreds of people react to, start hopping and getting you information or getting you documents or having them demanded to appear before a grand jury. That is a tremendous amount of power. Having the same leadership and position for too long, as we all know, the saying goes, power kind of corrupts. And so I think that there has to be some appreciation for the fact that this is not a lifetime position. I mean, I don't, this is not I'm not being appointed to some kingdom of some sort. I mean, I'm going to serve in this position for as long as the president hopefully asks me to serve, and then I'll move on to back to my private practice or to some realm of public service in some other capacity. But it's not supposed to be a lifetime appointment. The second thing is the hiring. When you have people who have been prosecutors, particularly prosecutors in Orleans Parish, to be candid with you, I think the result of having years and years and years of simply being prosecutors, it leads to you viewing the world in very black and white terms, very stark terms. Either you're a good guy and you're wearing the white hat, or you're all evil. And that includes not just the defendants that you're investigating, but it includes their lawyers, it includes any reporters who may be questioning how this office may be operating. Anybody who's not with us is completely against us. And so Again, what needs to happen is you need to bring in some different viewpoints. You need to bring into some different perspectives. You need to bring into some people, bring some people in who've walked in some different shoes beyond just being prosecutors. I think the result will end up being that you will have a more fulsome view of what it means what it means for us to utilize our power in an appropriate fashion. And so that's what I'm hoping to bring in terms of that dynamic.
So here's the elephant in the room for you.
Please.
You are 37
Yes, ma'am.
years old.
Yes. When this process started, I was 36,
Wow.
and so and even then people were saying, "I wish you were older. I wish you were a little older." Well, I'm a little bit older now.
And my question is, have you had any concerns expressed to you about your youth? And talk to me a little bit about not so much the challenges,
Mhm.
but what you think that your youth and your experience will bring
Yeah.
to the position once you are confirmed.
It's the greatest advantage that I have, frankly. This is a position that's going to afford me the opportunity to be able to not just serve as a chief prosecutor of federal offenses in enforcement of federal civil rights in this district, but also to serve and have the platform to reach out to young men and women in our city, and to really serve as a role model, hopefully, for what it means to pursue education to the fullest, to be involved in public service, to have a family there that's involved in public service. And so I think, frankly, the first speech that I hope to make is at Cohen High School, which is where, that's the high school that I'm currently chair of, and talk to the young men and women of that school and talk about how can they have a role in preventing and intervening on criminal offenses in their own neighborhoods. What are they looking for out of life? How can we best support you in helping you to be the next future leaders of this city and this region? And so, my age is one that's it's gonna open some doors for me. It's gonna open some doors for this office that have been closed. One piece of this of my background, which I've referenced at times, it's not something that I bring up all the time, though, is the fact that I have a brother who actually died, who was killed in the streets of New Orleans. Like many young African American men in this city, all too often this is happening. And I don't shy away from the fact. I mean, he was a person who was a half brother and raised by a different mother. But for the grace of God, I could have gone the route that he went, which is engaging in criminal activity, engaging in drug trafficking. And his death really has always served as a motivating factor for me, a motivation to become a federal prosecutor, a motivation for me to come back to New Orleans and try to help other young men like himself to avoid that fate for themselves. So that's really where I'm coming from with this, and I think that's when people talk about my age. I mean, this is a job that requires a lot of energy. It requires a lot of vigor. It's a lot of 24-hour days, sleepless nights, and fortunately, myself and my family, and most importantly, my wife, we're all committed to that task.
My final question is one I like to ask, and that is there anything I haven't asked that you want the people of New Orleans, the people of the Eastern District to know about Kenneth Pulley?
Sure. I mean, I think the most important thing that I want people to understand is that my background is one that has been marked by leadership. I've been a leader in every organization that I've ever touched. It's been marked by public service. As I mentioned, going back to my days in high school, it's been one of the critical lessons that I carry with me every day. But most uniquely, I think what I'm bringing to the table is a history of really building bridges, of creating relationships where there were none, of really bringing together people from diverse backgrounds, diverse interests, and really helping them forge a relationship that can take them to the next step. And so that's what I'm hoping to bring to bear here. I'm not registered to any political party. I don't view this as a political job. I understand that the reality of this appointment process is a political one, but it by definition is an office that requires a political stance. And so my view is that I'm going to be bringing to the table Republicans, Democrats, people in Orleans Parish, people from the river parishes, all together to help address the chief objective of this office, which is to protect the citizens of the Eastern District of Louisiana.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.